Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of the SANS Threat Analysis Rundown. I'm Katie Nichols. I'm an instructor for Forensics 578 Cyber Threat Intelligence, also Director of Intel Ops at Red Canary. And I'm excited to be here for our December edition of our live stream. Been a long year and lots going on, lots we've talked about this year. And a great way we're wrapping up this year of live streams is with the guest talking about forecasting and prediction, right? What better time to talk about this than at the end of the year as we're asking to predict the future or anticipate threats next year. So today's speaker actually submitted to the SANS CTI Summit. If you have not signed up, we'll drop a link in. SANS CTI Summit, January 29th and 30th, 2024, which seems so far away, but it's just next month. We have so many awesome talks planned, and our current speaker today, Robin, submitted his talk, and we just could not fit into the agenda. So he was kind enough to present today and give us a sneak preview of the kind of talks you're going to see at the CTI Summit. So definitely sign up for that today. Totally free online, or we would love to see you in person in Washington, D.C. as well. So today's speaker is Robin Dimyanoğlu. Robin is the Red Team lead at HelloFresh. And as I mentioned, right, we're in December. Sounds like you lost my audio. That's okay. Go for it, Robin. Welcome and excited to hear from you.
Hi, Katie. And I missed the last part of what you said, but I will just introduce myself. First of all, thank you very much for hosting me today here. And thanks everyone for joining this. So my name is Robin, and I'm a cybersecurity expert living in Berlin. And as Katie mentioned, I'm working at HelloFresh as the team lead for the Red Team. So previous to that, I was working as a CTI analyst. Then I have moved a little bit into the offensive security area. And as a fun fact about myself, I'm a history nerd. I love everything about history, and I also like many social sciences. So in my personal opinion, cybersecurity is also inherently a social science. So what I'm trying to do for the past couple of years is that I'm reading a lot of stuff in intelligence studies and military studies, and try to see how we can apply them into cybersecurity, because there are a lot of insights we can take. So yeah, that's about me.
Excellent. Well, so happy to hear you. I think my voice went away, but it's back now. And so with that perspective, would love for you to dive in, Robin. I know you have a ton of material to share, so feel free, dive in.
Okay, thank you. Let me make this full screen. I think it should be working.
Yep, looks great.
Cool. So thank you for everyone again joining my presentation today. It will be about something which I named the predictive cyber defense. So it is essentially a concept where most of the focus we put is on the prediction and anticipation. So we will talk a lot of things about how we can apply predictive analysis techniques in the context of cyber threat intelligence. So, as I already introduced myself, I will not go over again. But if you like to connect with me, you can connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. And as well as I'm writing a blog and Medium, and I'm writing mostly about the topics which I'm going to discuss here in more detail. So if you are curious, please be my guest to check them out. So today's agenda, today's agenda, we will walk through, start by saying what is like exactly predictive defense, right? So this isn't a term that is in the literature of cybersecurity. So we will make some distinctions. And then we will go over some predictive analysis techniques shortly, and then move on to their applications. So here we will look at it at two levels. So first level would be like a more technical and tactical level, which I named, like, not my original name, of course, but I named as early warning system. So this will be more about how we can anticipate certain type of cyber attacks. And at the second level, we will talk about forecasting. So this is more about like examining in this presentation, examining cybercrime markets and also cyber espionage operations from a systems level perspective. To see if we can, forecast in long term the changes in them. So this is more about, not really about like anticipating the attacks itself, but it is about anticipating the changes within these environments and observing them. So let's start with making some distinctions. So I want to list these three examples. So in cybersecurity, most of the focus is on usually reactive and proactive defenses. So what does it mean? So with the reactive defense, it is about an event that has happened in the past, or it is happening currently, and we are like reacting to it. So this could be something like, okay, there is a campaign that is currently ongoing, and here are the indicators of compromise. Now let's feed these IOCs into our prevention systems like firewalls or WAFs or EDRs, so we can prevent them. So this is like a reactive approach because the attack has already started. So with the proactive approach, the attack has not started yet, but we suspect that it might target us when it does. So most many times when you see works on threat actor profiles, which are used, by clustering, constructed by clustering intrusion sets with their TTPs, right? So that kind of profiling work in the field of CTS is more oriented towards proactive, because we say something like, in that case, okay, here is a threat actor that is known to target our industry vertical. So we don't know of any campaign ongoing yet, but if it starts a campaign, it is likely to target us because, they did that in the past. And here are the tactics, techniques, and procedures of that. So let's build some detections around this, and let's prioritize fixing of maybe these vulnerabilities that has been used in the past. So this is more proactive. But again, these insights are drawn from analyzing, past incidents. So how does predictive approach distinguish? The most important difference is the emphasis of time. So contrary to the proactive approach, with the predictive one, we say we expect an attack to start within a certain time frame. So this is the most crucial distinction. So a case for predictive example could be, we anticipate a spear phishing attack to start within 2 weeks, and it is likely to target us. So there is also a time element when we are talking about predictions. So now let's go over a few of predictive analysis techniques. So there are many techniques that can be used here. I have listed just a few of them, but the main idea is you can approach it from two ways. The first group of methods is what is called an analytic techniques. So these are the indications and warnings and cone of plausibility and signpost analysis. And the second kind of approach is a statistical approach. So here you see there are correlation-based techniques and Bayesian probability. But there are many, many more techniques. I will not, deep dive into descriptions of these, but we will be applying these in the further slides. So, like every intelligence cycle, it starts with the research questions. So what is the focus with the predictive defense? So some research questions could be, how can I detect the upcoming spear phishing attacks? So here you can say the focus is on the upcoming attacks. So the focus is in the future, not in the present or in the past. Or from a more strategic level perspective, we can say, how can I predict what kind of threats will be more relevant to me in the future, in, let's say, 1 year from now? So this is, again, with this kind of research question, our focus is on the future. But as with every research question, these can and should be revised and better refined. So instead of saying, how can I detect the upcoming spear phishing attacks, we can say, are there any early signs of a spear phishing campaign that I can observe? So this is a better refined question that we can use. And when you read it, you can see, it gives like a certain direction to our research. So now we are looking for researching about an early signs that we can observe from outside. And instead of asking, how can I predict what kind of threats will be more relevant, we can ask, what influences targeting decisions by the adversaries, right? So with this refined version, it is also like gives us a better direction. So we know what we will like research about. We will research about the factors that influence the targeting decisions of the adversaries. So what is an early warning system? So an early warning system is essentially a methodology that I'm going to present here, a methodology that you can use to examine the data from internal and external sources, then cultivate signals out of this data and use that to anticipate attacks that are, that is imminent to happen. So here we will mainly use two kind of research approaches. First of which is a profile-driven research approach. So in this case, what we do as defenders, we gather internal data about attacks, and we create the clusters based on their similarity. So we will have like multiple clusters, and then we try to find patterns within each of these clusters. So by using these patterns, we can use these to predict future attacks if there is anything that we can observe. The second approach is a correlation-guided research. So in this case, we are not trying to profile an attack type, but instead we are collecting data from multiple sources, both internal and external sources, and we are researching if there are any correlation between any of these data. So if we happen to find any, we can use these to have like a probabilistic alerting system by combination of alerts of these signs. But one thing to note is that correlation does not mean causation. So even though correlation might be sufficient in this case to generate the alert, it may affect how we respond to that event if we do not investigate the underlying cause causing this correlation. So that is something to be careful of. So starting with the profile-driven research, we will take an example of a spear phishing attack. So how does a spear phishing look like from an adversary's perspective? So an adversary, before starting any spear phishing campaign, they should, there are like certain steps they should take. So first of which, they should curate a list of employees to be targeted. And then they should set up a phishing infrastructure. And in case they are going to deliver malware, they should be like setting up an infrastructure for command and control and the distribution host. Or if they're going to deliver a credential harvesting page, they should then set up a landing page. And then they should also set up some distribution method. So these are the preliminary steps an adversary should take. And as you can see, when we list the techniques that can be used for them, there are some of the techniques that we can observe actually that are happening. So when curating a list of employees, an adversary may just use open sources. That is like a very possibility. But they may also try to interrogate our services, email services or identity services like LDAP to enumerate for employee emails. So these interactions that we can observe and monitor from our side. And also infrastructure element, if there are some patterns within them, can be tracked and scanned for So in the CTI field, these practices are like broadly called as C2 pivoting, if I remember correctly. So those techniques are really useful in this case. So what we do is we investigate the infrastructure and how it is configured. So we then try to fingerprint them or find patterns in them, and then we scan the internet for to see if there are like any new infrastructure. And if we are lucky, we would actually be able to find the server before it is active. So let's put a defender's hat for a moment and look from our perspective what we need to do. What we should do initially is to gather data from our internal sources, let's say CM events or incident postmortems or other like security telemetry about the spear phishing attacks. Then we should create clusters based on similarities. So we will probably have like some multiple clusters, and then we should look for patterns in these phishing instances we receive. So it doesn't have to be like a single pattern across all of the instances, because let's say like half of the phishings you receive will probably just be like some scam attempts. Some other amount will be like classic malvertising, but a very tiny amount will be like more targeted things. So it will be like a mix. So you will probably end up with like multiple clusters. So then after building these clusters, we will ask some questions to these clusters like this. So what is the mean time between two spear phishing attacks? Or how many employees are targeted in each cluster? So these questions will help us actually profile the intrusion cases that we have gathered the data for. So we are essentially looking for patterns. So is there anything that we can fingerprint in the infrastructure? Or are there any malware families that I receive very frequently? Or what is the distribution of these attacks throughout the year? Let's say, is there like any particular season where these attacks peak? So those kind of patterns can help us build our early warning system. So as a real life example, I have in the past investigated a spear phishing campaign, which I named as Leary Turtle. So this was a spear phishing campaign that targeted the crypto exchange businesses worldwide, and it was later attributed to North Korea. So I have observed from my customer's perspective, I have observed several patterns. So the domain names they have used for C2 servers contained very specific keywords. Because of the pretext they used, they were trying to imitate like cloud file hosting services. So the domain names would always contain like at least two of these keywords that are listed. And also these staging services were actually like a compromised web applications, but the adversary didn't touch the main web application. They didn't delete it, but they would open a second port and run their C2 service there. So in, I think all of the cases, if I remember correctly, the server had the ports 80 and 88 open at the same time. And on the port 80, it had like some irrelevant application. And also there were like approximately 3 months between two campaigns from my customer's perspective. And the most striking thing with this case is that these patterns have remained consistent for more than 2 years. So there is like a huge observation opportunity given that we profiled this attack and built the system. So let's do some indications and warning analysis. By all of this knowledge about the preparation stages, what we can do, we can monitor, first of all, our mail services or identity services for signs of interrogation. So if someone is trying to like enumerate emails, they are like, there is a possibility that they will be used later in a spear phishing campaign. And then after profiling these intrusion set clusters, if we have found some patterns within the infrastructure, we can scan the internet to spot new infrastructure based on these profiles. And again, like the techniques within like infrastructure pivoting and C2 pivoting are very, very useful here. And if there is a specific malware family that are of concern to us, or like a few malware families that are of concern to us, we can also use sources like VirusTotal or Malware Bazaar to track these malware's activities. Or maybe we can even like write some Yara rule to get alerted on like a new submission of the same malware family. So this can be also used as another signal. Also tracking the activity like over time can tell us, for example, if we observe a recent search of the malware samples, it could mean that an attack, a campaign has already started. And by the same logic, we can also track for vendor reports if the campaign has a name and has been reported previously. So we can use those keywords on certain platforms to get alerted, or maybe also on Google. So we can use all these signals or combinations of those to have like different levels of confidence regarding an attack is going to start or not. But how do we actually build the system, early warning system? So the answer is data analysis. So what we do after deciding on these signals, we either extract a history of these signals retrospectively if we have the data already, or we start recording these signals for some period of time, let's say 6 months, 1 year, 3 months. And then we compare this data set with the history of spear phishing attack that we have received. And we will then try like different ways and combinations, so we can assign ways to each signal. It could be based on our judgment, or we could again use statistical methods to see which model makes the best prediction. And then there is a problem of a signal lifetime. So when we can decide that a signal is no longer valid, like after what time we can decide that. And one thing I found useful here is to use the mean time between attacks. So for the Lily Turtle example, for example, it was approximately 3 months. So I will look at like multiple occurrences of multiple signals within the period of 3 months. Then it would make sense. But after 3 months, signals could like expire because it's been like too long. You can also use this mean time between attacks to schedule threat hunts. So you can just say it has been 3 months, and we have had multiple instances of this. Right, the approximate mean time is like 3 months, and we haven't observed anything, neither through early warning systems or through our detection system. So it is a good point to begin suspect if there is anything we are missing, as initiate a threat hunt based on this. But sometimes the model is not good enough, so you may have to actually like start over again. With both of these approaches, they are like essentially research approaches. So research means there will be a lot of trial and error, and it is essentially like an experiment. So our second approach is a correlation guided research. So here we will examine the case study of info stealers and credential stuffing. So the idea with the correlation guided research is that we start by first collecting data from both internal and external sources. Then we try to find if there are like any correlations between them. So here in this example, I have collected data about these events. So I thought, okay, if my organization gets more mentions on the dark web, does it mean that I am more likely to be a target of cybercrime attacks? So I thought like questions like this, and then I have gathered like multiple data, multiple events about things that I thought could be related. So these were like dark web mentions, the reported phishing mails, coupon code sales, and info stealer leaked credentials and stuff like that. And I used like various sources. So I use intelligence platform, open source intelligence, like essentially external sources. And I also used logs from web application firewall and CM events, so to see if I can like find a correlation between them. So the second step is to filter out data sets with low variation among them. So in this case, for example, what low variation means is that an event is either too frequent or too rare. So it renders any correlations with itself meaningless. So in my case, like the phishing reports or spam reports we received them like every day. So there were, of course, like it was correlated with every other data set, but it didn't have any meaning. So I had to like eliminate that. And afterward, the binary combinations of these events are compared using a correlation function. So you could try with binary combinations, but if that doesn't work, you can also try with triple combinations. But what I do also, besides that, I repeated this process by shifting one of the data sets forward in time. So I forwarded like by 1 day each time. And what I was trying to think of is, okay, could this event A from today be relevant with an event B from, I don't know, some days ago? So I was trying to find an answer for that. And essentially, when I shifted one of the data sets by 2 weeks, I found like an interesting correlation. There was a moderate inverse correlation between the InfoStealer leaked credential events and DDoS attack events. So that was odd for me because InfoStealers and DDoSes are, kind of seem to me as unrelated events, right? So I decided to investigate the reason. So here I investigate, the causation behind the correlation to see if there are any cause. So what I did was I looked at the WAF logs to see, the contents of this like DDoS attacks actually. So where they like what technique were used, etc. And then I realized that some of the DDoS attacks were not actually DDoS attacks, but credential stuffing attacks. Because of how this attack was executed, they were like sending repetitive requests. So WAF was classifying them as DDoS attacks sometimes. And then I started reading threat intel reports about these credential stuffing attacks. So I found out that these cyber criminals were curating a combo list, user password list, specific to their target. And I found out that also in those reports that they are constantly trying to update their list using some open source data like InfoStealer logs or data breaches that are like publicly released. So they were, when there's a database breach or when there is like an InfoStealer log published, they would like use these to update their combo list, and then they would launch their attack again. So then I thought, okay, I may have actually found the reason behind this correlation. So from my understanding, attackers were constantly looking for these data breaches and InfoStealer leaks. And when they saw, when they find credentials that could work on our platforms, they would extract them, update their combo list with a new username and passwords, and they would launch the attack. So then our hypothesis is like the following. So if accounts belonging to our customers have been leaked in publicly shared InfoStealer logs and data breaches, then there is a 40% probability that a DDoS credential stuffing attack will occur within 2 weeks. So this is the like hypothesis that I have created, and this will be, what an early warning will look like. So just to also like, give an example of an early warning. You may have noticed in this hypothesis on the, below on the slide, it contains 3 key information. It contains probability level, and it contains the, type of attack, and it contains a certain time frame. So the combination of these 3 information constructs an early warning. So again, let's do some indications and warning analysis. So how we would construct the system. So from the defender's perspective, we would first identify and monitor the sources where InfoStealer logs and data breaches are publicly shared. Then we would try to detect leaked accounts belonging to our organization or customers. And when these accounts, the count of these accounts exceed a certain threshold, we would generate an alert. So this is how an early warning system essentially works. So the key takeaways here is that identifying early signs of an attack is possible if we focus on the preparatory stages. And developing these signals involves analyzing internal data to understand the characteristics of a cyber attack. So with this internal data, we are trying to either identify patterns and create profiles or try to find correlations. And a well-developed warning model using these signals can predict events with a degree of probability, giving the defender teams an ample time to prepare. So then here comes the second part of our presentation, which is forecasting. So here I will introduce some analytic frameworks for cybercrime, financially motivated cybercrime ecosystem and cyber espionage. But let's start with what is essentially forecasting. So forecasting is essentially an assessment of what's next in longer terms. So at least a year. But in this case, we are not talking about, anticipating specific cyber attacks, but we are actually trying to anticipate changes in the threat landscape. And ideally, this forecast should inform security leadership decisions, so the organization is better positioned against future threats. So again, imagine going back to the first slide, a reactive decision making could look like this. So, okay, last year we have received some DDoS attacks and it has caused downtime. So let's invest in some DDoS protection for next year. So this is like a more reactive approach to like security defense planning. A more predictive defense planning could look like, okay, we anticipate these changes in the threat landscape next year, and next year the threat of let's say network exploitation, like network service exploitation, will be more relevant for us. So it will be more frequent or maybe more impactful for us. So the risk will increase. So let's invest some money in there, or let's initiate some projects in advance so that we are better prepared for this. So these are like more strategic level decisions and information. So we have a lot of analysis techniques for forecasting, but what we lack, contrary to the traditional intelligence analysis, we lack actually the mental models, the analytic frameworks to analyze cybercrime or cyber espionage in a systemic way. So in traditional intelligence analysis, we have frameworks like a PESTEL, a Dimyanoğlu as temples. So these are used essentially to define the factors influencing a landscape. In these cases, it is like used for analyzing a country. So they define these factors and they assume some changes in these factors and try to generate scenarios from that. So with PESTEL, for example, I think it's standard for like political, economical, sociological, technological, legal, or something. So these were, from the understanding of that framework, these were the influential factors in an environment. So here I will provide a framework for analyzing cybercrime markets. And when we talk about cybercrime markets, I'm not talking not necessarily about the marketplaces itself, but I'm calling it a market from like as it is used in economy. So as with regular markets, cybercrime is also influenced and actually directed by the forces of supply and demand. So, and there are several factors that influence cyber and demand that may cause changes or pressures on supply and demand. And these are what are called the drivers of change. And when I examined these environments, I have identified 6 factors affecting it. And these are like consumer habits. So consumer habits are, for example, is very effective in cybercrime markets where they are selling premium VPN accounts or coupon codes or Amazon coupons or some stolen accounts, commonly stolen by credential stuffing attacks. So these products, commodities, are directed at end users. So it is very fragile to changing consumer habits. And value of commodity is another driving factor. So the most striking case for this is actually the crypto mining attacks. So crypto mining attacks were like introduced to the threat landscape when the value of Bitcoin like increased into several hundred and several $1,000s. Before that, it was not much of a concern. And expanding target range actually describes like the new potentials for an attacker by expanding their platform that they are targeting. So this could be like, for example, mobile banking malware. So the cyber criminals after some time decided to target mobile platforms. Proliferation of capabilities means it is a fancy word used to say a technical capability is now available to a wider audience. So it is either through automation by releasing tools, or it is through a service. So let's say ransomware as a service or stressor as a service are like examples. So here, either a technique is complex, or there is like a complex chain of actions. Then these are like packaged in like in a tool or in a service and provided to other people. So this obviously like increases their usage. And legal and technical measures create most of the force on the supply side. So, for example, banking regulations leading to banks taking more technical measures against credit card fraud, which is like putting a pressure on the supply. And law enforcement pressure is also another factor, because law enforcement over time changes their focus towards different types of crime. So most recently, this is ransomware, and previous to that, it was botnets, and previously it was more credit card frauds, right? So the focus is shifting, and it causes pressure on the supply again, on different markets, on different times. So these are the overall drivers, but how does market respond to these changes? So what I have seen is the market responses in four patterns to these. So first pattern is innovation, which is essentially cyber criminals trying to overcome an obstacle that they have encountered. So this could be like a technical measure they are trying to bypass, or sometimes cyber criminal like monetize from the same data, same access in a different way. So this is the case with the initial access brokerage. So this is more of a commercial innovation. And also the case with infostealer log markets, right? So botnets already existed before infostealers, but they are like simply monetizing it in a different way. So migration means that the demand for a product or a value of the commodity has really diminished. So the actors in that market are migrating to somewhere else. And consolidation means when there is like a considerable pressure on the supply, either because of a technical measure or an attack may have become more expensive or more risky to do due to low enforcement pressure. What we see is there remains a few people who is willing to afford the investment into it, or who is willing to afford the risk of conducting such attacks, or who is like knowledgeable enough to bypass the measures. So then the market begins to consolidate around these few key players. And expansion means that a market has growth. So it may be because of a new opportunity. Maybe there's like a new target range, new platform that could be targeted. So this means more profit of opportunities for attackers. So more people start to enter this market. So these are the main drivers of change, and these are the patterns of the market response. But how do we actually do the analysis? So it's in 5 steps. So the step 1 is choosing a specific market and conducting market-based basic market research. And I will show how that looks in a second. And after doing this research, in step 2, we try to assess possible changes in the market drivers using the 6 factors we have just described. So we try to make assumptions and list assumptions about these changes. So then, after listing these assumptions, for each assumption, we brainstorm scenarios for potential outcomes. So this is the scenario ideation phase. We try to generate as much scenario as possible. And then for each of the scenario, we ask ourselves, okay, if this specific scenario materialized, how can I observe them? How would I observe that? Then here we try to cultivate some signposts of change. And when we cultivate the signposts of change, we start observing the dark web sources or whatever you're using for these signposts to monitor emergence of scenarios. So this is the overall process. So for example, here I have taken the credential stuffing market because we have talked about it a lot. So for this market, the basic research consists of several key questions. So what we are trying to understand here is basically the size of market, the volume of market, how many actors are there, and what is the distribution of supply. So for credential stuffing, the estimated market size was like $150,000 to $240,000. So this includes anything from premium VPNs to premium some website accounts, Netflix accounts, Amazon coupon codes, or any other things. So the whole volume of the market was this. This is an estimation. This is not accurate, so don't challenge me. Then the other question was if there are any consistent suppliers. So when I researched this, I realized the supply structure was like the following. So 6 actors controlled half of the supply, whole supply. And other half were controlled by over 50 very small actors, and these actors were not even consistent. So they were just like entering the market and leaving the market. So they were like active for temporary times. But these 6 actors by themselves controlled the half of the market, and out of that 6, only 1 of them controlled a quarter of the market. So this was the like distribution of the supply. And because of the commodities here are directed at end users, they were sold in retail. So there was, I could not observe like any relationship between these actors themselves. So this is our basic research. And then we apply some SAT called cone of plausibility. Now I'm aware that this is not a cone, but I had to like fit this information into a slide. So this is just like one piece. So how it works is we first list the drivers on the left side, and then we try to assess possible changes in the market conditions. So in this example, the driver we took as an example is a consumer habit, since we are examining the credential stuffing market. So the question here is there any reason for consumer habit to change in the future? So we are trying to think about like scenarios where consumer habit may change. And there is actually a known influence, after the COVID pandemic, there is a known decrease in consumer demand to digital products and services, right? It caused like a massive layoffs in a lot of the companies just because of this. And this will obviously have reflection on cybercrime market as well. So we assume that consumer demand will decrease over time. So now as the third step, taking this assumption, we brainstorm potential scenarios for potential outcomes of these changed conditions. So this is where the cone of plausibility comes in play. So cone of plausibility says, first think about the most likely scenario, then think about the worst case scenario, and then think about whatever is between. So you try to create as much a scenario as you can for each assumption. So originally, a cone of plausibility looks more like this. So there are much more scenarios. But in our example, the outcome for this assumption, one of the potential outcomes could be when criminals see their diminishing source of income, they will just like migrate to other markets. And they will not just migrate to any market, but they will migrate to markets where they can repurpose their existing skills. So one example could be like they may repurpose their skill by starting to brute force network services instead of web applications. So they may actually enter initial access brokerage market. So this is like one of the patterns that we have described. So now for each of the scenarios, we create the signpost for observation. So we think of that for each of these scenarios. We say, okay, if this scenario happened to be materialized, how would we monitor for that? So we determine the signpost of change. So with the scenario we have what we have just discussed, the signposts of change could be like a number of messages containing coupon sale related keywords decreasing over time. So we assume that if there are less coupons sold after some time, then the demand must have been decreased because people seem to be leaving the industry, the market. And as another signpost could be the non-coupon retailers. Remember those 6 actors controlling half of the market. Non-coupon retailers starting to sell other commodities because it has not been observed yet. So we assume that if they start to sell other commodities, it is because their like source of income is diminishing due to decreased demand. So key takeaways. So financially motivated cybercrime is driven by the same forces of market forces of supply and demand, and it is crucial for us to understand the factors that influence these forces so that we can better analyze it. And then markets react to changes in these conditions with patterns such as like innovation, migration, consolidation, or expansion. So the last part, the part which is my favorite, so geopolitical cyber risk analysis. So in this part, we will mainly discuss what drives targeting by intelligence agencies, in the context of cyber espionage, and how we can use this insight for long-term forecasting. So for here, we will mainly examine the different types of intelligence collection. So as you already know, there are different intelligence collection disciplines to address different kind of intelligence requirements. So they work in the same way our CTA organizations work, right? So they have like intelligence requirements. So some of these disciplines are like political intelligence, military intelligence, economic intelligence, but there are like many other. But in the context of cyber intrusions, so the most common causes for cyber intrusions are either political intelligence, military intelligence, or economic intelligence. So of course, other intelligence collections have their share in it, but these are the like most common cases. At least that was my impression from the open source information. So, sorry, before going here. So from an organization's perspective, we should first start by thinking about, okay, does my organization possess anything that may concerns military, economic, or political objectives of any country, right? It could be related to one of my assets. It could be something that I'm producing, or it could be an individual who is working in my organization, right? So we first start by thinking, okay, is there anything that concerns any kind of like foreign policy objectives or any kind of military objectives of any country? Then we need to distinguish again between strategic collection and tactical collection. So this is not to be confused by strategic and tactical intelligence, but this is from an intelligence agency's perspective. These mean that if a target is of strategic importance and could be like should be targeted over long term, or if it is like fulfilling a tactical need and immediate information need, so it should be like targeted with more advanced capabilities. So if an organization may be part of strategic collection efforts if they can supply the information that supports long-term policies. So if a target is capable of supplying information that supports the long-term policies of a country, or they can fulfill several intelligence requirements at once, simultaneously, or they can offer some information that an agency is constantly in need, then they are more likely to be a part of strategic collection. Now, with this type of targeting, the targeting is expected to be persistent, adaptive, and long-term, but it is unlikely to employ advanced and event-based capabilities like 0 days, for example, or advanced implants. On the contrary, if a target is capable of fulfilling an intelligence need that is immediate and critical, or a target is able to provide an info that an agency is unable to obtain through alternative sources, then that organization is more likely to be a part of tactical collection efforts. So here, the targeting is expected to be persistent and adaptive again, but the likelihood of employing advanced capabilities like 0 days is much higher. So this is usually the case when, for example, there is an active conflict zone. So think of like Russia and Ukraine war. So there is like an active conflict zone, or there is like a diplomatic escalation between two countries, or there is some like investigation by like internal security forces, like law enforcement investigation or like intelligence investigation. So you can see, for example, in some of the CTR reports, you can see some governments targeted journalists or dissidents, right, using 0 days. So that represents like a very good example of a tactical collection, because the information cannot be obtained by alternative sources, or because of that, the timeliness of the information that is needed, they are using more advanced capabilities. So how does the process look like from the organization's perspective? So as defenders, we should first consider our businesses and see if there's anything about the organization that may concern political, economic, and military interests of any country. Then, as a second step, we should try to identify the countries whose interests may lead their intelligence services to target you. I will get more specific on that with an example. So try to get as specific as you can about why they may target you. Is it because of a product that you are producing, concerning the, I don't know, some military intelligence requirement, or is it something else? Try to get more specific. And as the third step, for each of the countries, try to understand what kind of collection effort you are likely to be part of. So are you, from that country's perspective, are you a strategic target, or are you a tactical target, or maybe both? then map all these information with the cyber capabilities of each country. So the example here is I have put like three snippets from three news articles, but it is about, you don't need to read like all of this. It is about like the competition between China and US in the industry of e-commerce. So e-commerce is like a area of strife competition, also like international competition between a lot of countries, but especially China and US is like competing like really hard in this area. So this is the case in 2018. The government of Turkey, like government officials from Turkey, were like discussing with Alibaba Group and Amazon about like potential investments in Turkey. And upon the rumors of Amazon entering the Turkish market, Alibaba preemptively acquired the leading e-commerce company of Turkey, which is Trendyol. So this move actually clearly demonstrates the strategic value and importance of e-commerce sector from China's perspective, right? And then we see also in 2021, we see in the China's 14th five-year plan, we see that their intention to increase their investments in this area to increase the quality and also like expand. So what does that mean? Because of this strategic importance from China's perspective, we can assume that by their strategy of acquiring companies within the company they're planning to enter, we can assume that the companies within the country will likely be a target of an economic intelligence requirement, economic intelligence collection. Because it is also known from the past reports that cyber intrusions and cyber espionage is used during these like M&A processes, quite a lot actually. So by from moving on from these insights, we can say that if China is looking to enter a country by like acquiring some companies, they will like more likely to do some research before through cyber espionage. So the e-commerce companies of that country can expect to be introduced new threat actors into their threat landscape, like Chinese threat actors. So using these insights, how we can anticipate in longer term. So for example, we now know that China has still the intention to invest more in this area and expand more. So we can follow the news about this expansion, and we can try to understand which countries China is more likely to expand next in the e-commerce sector. Then use that insight as like as a kind of forecast, right? So then if we inform the e-commerce companies of that country, they would have like a longer term to prepare and maybe counter the threats from Chinese economic intelligence. So the key takeaways here, I hope I didn't exceed my time too much. So nation-state cyber intrusions typically fall into several categories. So I haven't mentioned the denial and coercion aspects, but focused on the espionage aspect. And the motives behind the cyber espionage are shaped by the nation's political, economic, and military objectives. And business may be targeted by intelligence agencies if they are holding anything that are of interest to these policies. So in my blog, I have also like a blog post about this. I have included actually like blueprint files to be used in these threat modeling. So for that, you can visit my blog post, and I can also like send the link to be shared. And that was all for my presentation. And thank you for listening. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robin. I know I'm going to be going back and reading your blog posts, looking at some of those slides, a wealth of information. I appreciate that you had some specific examples too. If anyone has questions, feel free to drop those in the comments and I'll facilitate. But one question I wanted to start with in a couple minutes we have left. I think one of the challenges we have in cyber threat intelligence is that, right, we have to sometimes educate our consumers about how to think about intelligence. And I think even more so with forecasting, with predictive or anticipatory intelligence. So Robin, I'm curious your thoughts. What recommendations do you have for anyone who's trying to explain to consumers the limitations of these approaches, or, how should decision makers think about forecasting or predictive intelligence?
Yeah, definitely. That is one of the issues, because also cybersecurity community as well is not used to work with estimates, apart from the CTI. So that is certainly going to be a challenge with the customers for this information. So I'm currently working on another post, which I will introduce some concept which I call the proactive countermeasures framework. So what it means, it is like a framework designed to work compatible with the early warning systems. So with the early warning systems, we receive information like, okay, there's going to be attack with 50% probability. And this framework basically lists the controls that can be implemented for temporary times or preemptively. So these controls are usually not feasible to implement permanently, but their side effects could be tolerated in certain cases. So let's say, for example, in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, there are like a lot of techniques for on the execution tactic, right? So usually in most of the organizations, when you try to write out block these execution techniques from like using group policies, there will be like a lot of problems, because a lot of people come and say, okay, my thing doesn't work, so you will have to like reopen it. But in cases of elevated threats, if you are anticipating a spear phishing attack, for example, and the people with higher privileges that may be targeted, or the set of people who are more likely to be a victim of spear phishing, you can actually temporarily disable those execution techniques using the group policies, or even not maybe disabling, but you may configure your CM alerts to get alerted about these executions. So usually those may create a lot of false positive unless you like make it more specific with some TTPs or like signatures, right? So just alerting on those will generate a lot of false positives. But for a temporary time, it may be possible to set up that alert for a limited scope of person. So we have like an enhanced visibility of that execution. So when we receive the spear phishing, indeed, we would be like right away detected and block it. So that is the kind of approach, and it is mostly about preparation. And to be able to do that, I liken it to the risk management approach, where organizations define their risk appetite, right? So they should also be defining for themselves what percentage of probability they will act on and what kind of actions they can take. So they should have like decided on a repertoire of actions. So yeah, this is kind of long answer, but yeah.
Oh, I think a lot of concepts there. I think as you're presenting, one thing I was struck by was, when we're talking about forecasting, there's an element of time. And I appreciate that, the types of decisions we're informing, maybe it's the acceptance of, okay, increased monitoring or blocking PowerShell as an example for a limited period of time. I think that's a great application, right? Outcome from doing this forecasting and prediction. So
Yeah.
Excellent. I see we had a comment come in, kind of a big question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to punt any other questions. We dropped in links to Robin's social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, also Robin's blog. So a lot more to come, sounds like, and some maybe future blog posts on this topic. So Robin, thank you so much for coming, for sharing all this information. I also wanted to highlight a related blog post if you were interested in tracking emerging trends, similar to what Robin talked about today. A great blog post from my colleague John Doyle, another Forensics 578 instructor, talking about his approach to that. And he actually links to some of Robin's content as well. So with that, that's all we have. Robin, thank you so much for your vast knowledge here and sharing so much, especially as we are wrapping up 2023, thinking about predicting 2024. So with that, that's all we have for today. Just a reminder, SANS CTI Summit coming up in late January. On next month's Star live stream, I'm actually going to be joined by my summit co-chairs, Rebecca Brown and Rick Holland, to kind of give a primer, what to expect. If you're maybe newer to cyber threat intel, break down some concepts that'll help you get the most out of that summit. So CTI Summit, if you haven't signed up, please do. You can find that link on the SANS website. And with that, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for hanging out today and for hanging out all year with me. It's been so wonderful. I hope that regardless of how you celebrate your year end, it is happy and healthy and you enjoy time with family and friends and taking a break from the cyber threats. With that, I'm Katie Nichols. I will see you all in 2024. Have a great rest of your day and month. Take care.